Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to talk about soul gifts and soul purpose. And I want you to ask yourself this question. And it's not a mind question. It's really, in many ways, a soul question, a question that goes deep in your heart, but it goes deeper in your soul. So, are you living your life and soul purpose? And if not, I want you to consider some of the things that I'm going to talk about this morning and some questions that you should ask yourself. Okay. So, one of the things that, like many of us, I've always had a fascination with purpose, with people's purpose. I've always had a fascination about my own purpose. And even when I felt that I was along the right path, I always wanted to fine tune it. And if there's any ways that I could improve being in alignment, I did that. Now, for me, the word alignment, so for example, a lot of people use alignment in the words as if alignment is something that you always actually do or have to make happen, right? And for many reasons, I don't use the word alignment a lot, right? And there's some reasons because in the healing and coaching sector, the word alignment is often referred to when we are in our head and when we are making things happen, or sometimes it's the way it's promoted as if you're pushing something towards something. When someone is accessing their purpose, they're in the flow, right? So they are coming from a channeled state, right? It's a natural flow of energy that is not forced and it's not coming from the mental mind, right? And it's one of the reasons when I'm helping people with their purpose, I help them go deep and them do the questions. Even though there's things and I can get insight, it's not always my place to put that because it's so important when you're doing purpose work that it's led by the person, right? That we, as the coach or the healer therapist, is not projecting our perception onto that person. Of course, there's certain things we can do to help give people deeper insights. But when you're helping people unlock more of their purpose, unlock more of their gifts, you can give them little nudges and certain things, but it's so important that you help them get the space to blossom, right? Or the space to unblock what has been suppressed. Now, one of the things that I always encourage clients and students to do is to go back to the basics. Because no matter what we train at, and we can try training in so many evolved tools and techniques in the spiritual world, in the healing world, in the coaching world, believe me, I've done it. I've been a never-ending student, and I've been a student of so many disciplines, and most of the disciplines have not been like fast track courses, which are just a couple of weekends. Most of the courses I've invested in have been a year. Some of them I've went on for 2 years, 3 years, because to me it's about evolving and going deep. But the reality is there's so many things that we miss when we try and jump the steps and keep moving on to what we perceive as advanced things when we're not going back to the basics, right? The basics are fundamental, but it's the ego that often wants us to keep going for certain things. Now, I'm not saying there is, for example, I look at my journey, and if I hadn't went through certain stages, I wouldn't be ready or open for other things. That is part of the journey, right? We sometimes have to go round a windy road, and believe me, I went round a very, very windy road, and some of those, that road, it went deep. It went out up a mountain. Some of them I had quite a lot of brick walls, but at the end of the day, it's all learning. So I want you to think about your soul and your soul essence. So I'll explain my interpretation of this, why I think it's something that people don't do enough work on. And many people get stuck in their business, in their journey, and feel disconnected. And they're always looking outside for the answers. They're always seeking answers in different forms. They're not connecting at a soul level and getting the answers at a soul level. So when I talk about the soul, now I was brought up from a Catholic background, so you can understand what perception of we have of the soul. You had living it a holy soul, a blank soul, right? Now, so you know, a tainted soul. But to me, your soul is this essence, right? It's this essence and energy in you, and it's a mixture of things. Now, that could have all sorts of things energetic linked to it that shouldn't be there. So at a soul level, um, we often need healing at a soul level as well, because underneath that purity, underneath that those beautiful gifts that we have, the energy that we have, there is often lots of things attached to it, karmic patterns, distortions, self-sabotage. There can also be energetic imprints from all sorts of things, you know, from our ancestors. I mean, I could go into all sorts of things on different dimensions that can imprint at the soul level. And it's one of the reasons why my fascination for that, for a variety of reasons, led me down to lots of paths where it was modalities that worked at a soul level. It wasn't just working, it really cut through the core and it helped evolve. But the reality is, your soul is something that we're all supposed to feel very connected to, right? And so much so that we get intuitive, oh, sorry, we get intuitive messages. You know, when you're connected at a soul level, things just channel through you, right? Of course, you can go and meditate and get still and help you more clear. And I think that's something that we all, if you are working on any spiritual level, it's important that you do daily meditation, that you are a clear channel as much as you can, and you do things to clear that channel. But the more that you're in that soul, you're connected, and I think that's the key, connected at a soul level, and your connection's very strong and clear, the channel's quite clear. Your intuition is just so much more spot on. You tend to feel things, know things, can really, it's like almost, there's an instinct, it's in an instinct on one level, but instinct also can be like the survival response, which can be very fear-led. So it's kind of like instincts, but it's much, even when you get a really strong message of something that says no, that you are in danger, and it's intuition, it's a different energy than our instincts, as in our survival response instincts. Now, I'm not saying there can be a slight correlation, but what I mean is it comes through in such a powerful way bit gentle way on the body, as in it does not send you into fear. You can get a message that you know something's wrong and you feel it to your core, but it's different from the stress response, right? And in the good feelings that you get, you really feel at a certain level. Now, one of the biggest challenges we have in the modern world is that we are all in many ways conditioned to ask for help or to seek guidance or um, do everything from our conditioning, right? From the outside world, the beliefs that we've formed, and we don't connect in. Now, also, I also believe, and this is just my theory, that also sometimes people can rely too much on guides, right, and all that, because again, they're not building up the connection within them, that direct connection to source, and that they give over their power sometimes too much to they're not feeling into things in themselves, right? That they're giving it always to an external in some aspect. Now, when you are living your purpose, things flow, right? Now, that doesn't mean that things go perfectly all the time. The soul has to evolve, and at the end of the day, we are living a human journey at the moment. So we are having to, how could you say, in many ways, we have to evolve, and part of the spiritual awakening is evolving and becoming more aware of the world, the things we don't want to see, and the wonderful things that we do want to see and that we want to create. Now, part of that is more unlocking of the soul, the power of the soul. But because of the 3D world and the constraints of the world and society and what people believe and where their perception has, often when we arrive here, people are not ready for certain things. If we look at how much spirituality has evolved, even in just the last 10 years, in the last 20 years, and 30 years, and you go back 50, 60, 100 years in people's perception of things, and the world maybe not be ready for certain things. And it's like the soul is unlocking more and more as it moves forward and it awakens to its own truth, right, and its own value. If you're struggling with your purpose, right, often there's a disconnection to the soul, right? There is a disconnection to that channel, and you're too much in your head, or or you're coming, and it's in the same as head, you're coming from maybe fear, you're coming from lack, you're coming from trauma, or you're coming from conditioning, how you are showing up in your business, right? And it can show up in so many different ways for different people. And also, archetypes are a great way to demonstrate that. So, for example, sometimes the innocent archetype crave purity, and even though they come in with a more pure energy, the innocent archetype can be very childlike and it doesn't want to grow up, right? And they don't want to look at the dark. So, you have to have a certain strength and the innocent archetype and maturity in the innocent archetype, if that's strong, to evolve spiritually and to awaken. Because even though the innocent comes in with this, it's almost like they have a more, they've got more access to that purity in that crystal. They tend not to be as tainted. The shadow element can stop the innocent looking at the whole picture and facing the whole picture, and they can self sabotage by staying childlike too much that they don't want to grow up, right? They don't want to be mature, right? Or they don't want to face the dark. They convince themselves it's all about the light, right? So that's one aspect. Now, another archetype that is common that I suppose can these are just sometimes they're all different. We all have these things. Every single one of us have, but there's some archetypes that are easy to explain. So, for example, the rebel archetype is one that the rebel, when the rebel is coming, right? The rebel, in relation to your soul essence, the rebel archetype can get in the way when the soul wants freedom. The soul is seeking freedom. It's seeking a different way of being. It recognizes at a soul level that it feels strangulated, that it feels controlled. And I think the easiest way to explain that is think about a rebellious teenager. Don't know about you, but I was always this very quick, kind of shy, and very sensitive. Could you say not very out there person. And when I became a teenager, it was like almost something changed. Now, I'm not saying I was really aggressive, but I had felt very suppressed at soul level. So, what was I trying to do? Now, I did it in all sorts of ways. I done it creatively. I went into fashion. Now, if you see some of the things that I wore, it was unbelievable. It was just looked absolutely mental, but it was so outrageous, right? But that was the soul trying to free itself, right? So you think about the teenage years where that freedom seeking, right? Sorry, my phone, I didn't realize it was sitting there. But if the freedom seeking where the teenager goes a wee bit daft, and I mean, some of the things that I wore were really stupid looking, or just like wow, like so. Actually, in some ways, I mean, I know a lot of people say I'm kind of introverted and extroverted, right? But in certain things, but this was very like right. It was like let's put it this way: I stood out in a street. Now that's an example of where soul's trying to get a balance, but it pushes too far. It wants to be seen and it's very dominant, so it wants to try to dominate. You can also see this sometimes with people that are very introverted but have been suppressed for so long in their own wee world that when they come into their work or group environments, they want to push and they want to make sure that they're heard or seen. But guess what? They're not in the flow in that stage. They're pushing too hard. So guess what? They start to show up in a way that they're going to be seen. They're going to do that, but they're not in the flow, right? And then what can happen is they start going down a route, and it's like almost when your path leads you more and more into the ego, or more and more, and then other people give you ideas and tell you things. But what happens is the soul begins to move further and further away from what it needs and what it really desires and what is here. Now, no matter what archetypes you are, the biggest I think discernment when we're working on a spiritual level is having the honesty to understand, right, is this the ego that it's want to do this? Is it the ego or is it truly the soul? Now, I'll give you an example. If you're a creator, now I'm a very strong creator. So that means that on a daily basis, I'm constantly getting ideas. I get ideas all the time and I can easily jump from things to things because the ideas are constant. Now, that is great and that's one of my natural skills. So, obviously, when I'm working with clients, I can really help ignite that creativity and help them with creative solutions. That's a big asset. But the shadow element of that is that it's so easy for me to go with the ideas that come from the head rather than the soul. And I have to check in with myself daily and check in, is this idea coming from the ego? Is it coming from just the mind, just because the way my mind works? Or is it coming from, and that can be an imbalance, and I'll explain that in a minute. But or is it coming that the soul is the energy coming from the soul? Is it the soul that's in the flow, or is it the ego? Right. Now, I have a very overdeveloped creative side, right? And there's lots of actually theories. Is it to do with also because I have a condition that actually causes well, it's known to cause brain damage because I'm fine, right? But what I'm going to say is from a baby, I had something, and it's really interesting what areas of the brain it can impact. And it's interesting how the other sides of my brain evolved very, how could you say, one side of my brain overcompensates for other challenges I had. And so much so, I remember when I was at college studying music, um, there was the college was invited to ask some students into a certain type of study. And one of the head lecturer of my department suggested that I get, because she noticed how right brained I was. She said it was so extreme. I struggled in the left. Now, I'm logical. I'm quite logical, but on certain tasks, I struggle. So we're all like this, right? So we all have certain strengths that, yes, some of it can be nature, some of it can be nurturing, but it also can drive our path, right? But it's understanding when something's driving our path. Is it the soul, or is it the trauma, or is it the conditioning? And there's a fine line. When you're in the soul, when your soul essence is coming through and your soul gifts are coming through, it's just so natural you don't even think about it, right? Yes, I believe that most of our soul gifts are actually, we have them, most of them, and what I'll explain what I mean, come from when we arrive. And I think as a child, we have them and we evolve with them, right? But some of them we don't understand because we've not cultivated them, right, to maybe a later date, or we just don't see them, right? So I'm going to give you examples and it might help you understand. And the reason this was a topic I was intending to talk about. So after I posted the post yesterday about, asking people a bit about themselves, and particularly when Sally and Caroline answered theirs, it triggered me to talk about this because this is something I did mean to talk about because it's such an important topic. Now, as we evolve spiritually, now I'm going to talk, first of all, maybe I should define what I think is soul gifts and spiritual gifts. So sometimes people look at spiritual gifts as just your intuition and all the clears, or being able to, like, more psychic and things like gifts. Spiritual gifts come and show up in so many different ways, right? That's just like a new age term. Soul gifts come, we all are here with a unique purpose. We all are unique. We are all an important key element of the jigsaw. And now more than ever, it's time. It's time for us to play our part and, and be in that jigsaw, right? But you're going to struggle to be fully in that jigsaw and maybe get lost, not be found, if you're not really allowing the soul to express itself and you allow yourself to be in the energy of your soul, right? Most people are energetically out of their body, in many ways disconnected from the soul, or their soul power and their soul connection is so low that they're functioning different. They're functioning at a very unhealthy level, right? Now, things like your health, your intuition, your just general level even of being able to discernment, right? Even integrity, all these things can be easier when you are connected at a soul level, because what you're doing is you're trusting that flow within your own soul, right? If you're not, you are again dependent on externals, which can be temporary, can be false, can be confusing, can be distorted. And that means anybody or anything, because they can be interpreting and giving you information that is through their lens, right? Through their experience, through how they're seeing the world. So more than ever, it's always important that we try and unlock more of us, right? Now, I want you all to think about certain gifts that you have at the moment and what they may be related to from childhood, but you never thought about, right? So even though we consciously start our spiritual journey at a certain age and something triggers it, I believe that every single person that will be in this group and that go into this and be light workers and go into spiritual work will have had something from childhood that is part of their souls and spiritual gifts, but they just didn't know, or it was squashed down, right? Now, a lot of you will be will be empaths or highly sensitive people, so an HSP. Now, these are examples of where that is part of your soul's gifts. Your level of empathy or sensitivity is something that, yes, sometimes it needs to be cultivated. It has to be honed in. It has to be also healed. And because sometimes the empath or the sensitive, there can be trauma related to it, but I do not believe, there is some theories who say that all over empathy, all over sensitivity is trauma, and it's almost like you shouldn't have it. It's just damage, right? But is it damage when it gives you a level of gifts and skills that are needed in the world? That's the key, right? Now, I'm digressing, but I want to try and explain. So, there's so many things. So, for example, lots of people have premonitions. They see things when they're younger, but their parents will say, "No, you're imagining that," right? They just know things. These are all part of what we all have different levels of these experiences, but we push them down because of our conditioning, our own fears. And it can also be to do with trauma. I remember when I was between the ages of 17 and 19, I used to have to travel by train into Glasgow, right? First started off when I was going to college, and then it was later on when I was working. And I used to have the most horrible experiences going on those journey. It was really strange, but for some reason, I would get premonitions when someone was going on the track, when someone would be suicide on the track. Didn't know why, but when I was traveling or walking for the train that morning, particularly, it was always mornings for some reason. I, as I was leaving for that, would you call it? I was traveling, sorry, towards the train or going on my journey. I would just get a sense of knowing. Now, I have to be honest, between those ages I was going through it, like most teenagers, it was a vulnerable stage of my life. When I went to college, the first college, I got bullied a lot. So I probably was coming from already a state of fear and anxiety. So probably the vibration that I was vibrating, it was more likely to pick up. Right. Now, I'm not saying that's always the case, because I think that's a very naive perception. I don't think it's quite as clear as that. And I think there's lots of other factors. And sometimes people are meant to sense things for a variety of reasons. But that was so traumatic for me that I was shutting down. I also had experience in my 20s where I'd been dating someone quite shortly, and we kind of ended it in a way. It was not it wasn't ended in a bad way, but I then had this day where I had a complete premonition, and it was bizarre. I was seeing like it was like I was seeing a film with short clips, right? That's all I can say. It was like short clips throughout that day. And I seen him at his car. It seemed as if it was in some sort of, it was as if it was a crash, but I couldn't see the car was actually crashed, but that's what it looked like. It was like as if he was on the motorway and something had happened. And then I saw these other things. But what was hardest about it was I could feel what he was feeling physically, right? And I thought I was going insane. I thought I was going insane that much. I went to my sister's and I stayed with my sister, and I was literally nearly hysterical because throughout the day then I was getting more and more information, and I was feeling in his body. I could feel what he was experiencing. And after that, I really, really I tried to shut down so much of my gifts because it felt too much for me. Right? Now, we think about that. I was an adult then, right? But I was also had health challenges. So for me, I felt it was too much for me. I want you to think about as a child how much we shut down at a spiritual level, at a soul level. Think about the child that's naturally an artist and someone comes along and says, that's horrible, you'll never be an artist. Think about the person who was great with people, right? Absolutely amazing with people, would make a great nurse or doctor. But then someone said, that's not worthy. There are so many things that we all do in life and we're naturally good at, but sometimes someone else can dampen it, or we have a distorted perception ourselves, our own fears get in the way. One of the things that I noticed about the healing sector and the coaching sector, which makes me feel uncomfortable, and I think it doesn't help, it really doesn't help, is that there's lots of things that's happened in these sectors which has become the fashionable thing to do. And one of the things is coaching. Now, I did coaching when coaching wasn't fashionable, right? I started actually doing different like coaching skills and coaching type things over 30 years ago, right? My father was very big into personal development, self-development. So all he read was coach, these type of books, right? And so a lot of the tools and strategies I was using very early on, and then I started doing coaching very early on in my business, right? But what I noticed was how watered down things became, but also how confusing things became. So now in the world we have this sort of perception that suddenly if you just add coach to the end of your name, you can charge whatever you want. When I meet healers or therapists, now I do, and don't get me wrong, because obviously I'm a trained coach myself, but I have to be honest about this. But almost like that, you can charge crazy money for that, no matter even how good you are or not good, just because you're a coach, you charge, which is insane. But then someone who's maybe spent 20, 30 years really mastering certain modalities, doing all sorts of things to transform people from all sorts of things, really, diseases that, doctors like cancer. There's healers that I've met that are phenomenal, that they really clear people things very quickly too, right? And I've got a friend who's very good at certain things. He's actually cleared I had a benign tumor, and he literally, before I went in to get the benign tumor removed, they said they couldn't find it either shrunk, right, or it was gone. Now I have still another one, but this was one that was causing me bother, right? Now, what you've got to understand is that we all have certain gifts, and sometimes they're evolved and sometimes they're not, right? The biggest way we help them evolve is we get still and we don't get caught up in the world around us, how they're telling us we should show up, right? One of the best things that ever happened to me when I started my business was the fact I was actually removed from most people. My journey and my healing and even my modalities, I had to do in a kind of backward way, in a roundabout way, because of my health challenges. It took me 3 times to get my aromatherapy qualification because of my health challenges. I had to do some of my training privately. I got access to courses by distant learning that you would normally not be allowed to do. But I had an adjudicator who came to my home, right? And I was lucky. My mum and dad had pushed for me to go on a pilot scheme because at the time I was so well, right? But what that done, yeah, I was isolated. There were some things I did do with people, with other, but it took so much out of me. But one of the biggest things that happened was that I wasn't comparing myself to other people. I just I craved so much just to be of purpose, to live a life of purpose, right? And to be, because as a caregiver and nurture, part of my archetype traits is to be of service to others, to help, right? That's my main motivation. Now, the shadow element of the caregiver and the nurturer is that often they're not motivated by money, and that can get them into problems. Because they desire to help or they desire to overgive, right? But what I did was I focused on where I was feeling at a soul level and I was guided, but I also used the skills that I had. And along the way, yeah, I made some mistakes. My ego got in the way, and I went down paths and forced paths and tried to um, go through a brick wall or go over a brick wall when I wasn't supposed to go there. I was supposed to do something else. I learned the hard way. But one of the things that I learned along that path was in what I saw, and I saw so strongly in the spiritual and the healing community, was because we want to be the best healer of therapists. And I know I don't mean just from an ego perspective, that's not me. Most of us come into this sector and we care about people so much, and often, in many ways, we've been damaged so much on some level, right? Or we are so empathic and sensitive that we feel other people's trauma so much that we want to help. But we also recognize that often not one tool is going to fit all. And sometimes there's that part of us that we think that we're here to heal the world and that we're here to heal everybody, when actually here, first of all, to heal ourselves. But we're here to help the people that are most aligned with this. That's not taught. And sometimes we then end up with so many tools and techniques, and we end up, and most of my friends that are healers are like me. They've spent a lifetime investing in learning and trying to help others. And so much so that actually they don't have financial security. They tend not to have a lot of material things because it's always been about trying to be evolved spiritually, trying to learn more, and trying to also help themselves, but to have the skills and to help others, right? And also the desire and interest in this because they're so passionate about this type of work. Now, you can get caught up in that as well. You can get caught up in the unhealthy aspect because, again, that's part of our side. The soul is what the soul wants to experience, and it tends not to just be about if you feel that you're being guided just because of financial reasons, or just because you need to save your home, or you need to have an income or whatever. If you're starting to think along those lines, it's not the soul talking, it's the ego. And of course, you have to be practical. And in certain stages of your business and in certain stages of your life, there's some decisions. Sometimes we have to be practical. And sometimes it's about doing something else that brings in income as we start to do more on the side even of what our soul experiences. Depends on what stage you're at, right? And what you feel that you can comfortably do. Because if you put yourself in a situation where you are in fear and trauma, you're going to find it very hard to get into the flow of the soul, right? And especially, someone, if financial worries is something that's always been in your mind no matter what. If you're someone who it scares you not having financial security, well, you're going to find it very hard to be in the flow, right? If you are making certain decisions, right? Now, I believe that we all start out with this soul essence, unique energy that has our soul gifts, and the more that we evolve those gifts, they can turn into things. So I'm going to give you one example. So one of the things that I got told, particularly the last 10 years of my life, what I found very interesting, loads of psychics and healers said to me, Eileen, you could be a transfigurationist. I was like, oh, no way. That scared the living daylights out of me. It just does not interest me at all. But they were talking about the level of my empathy and sensitivity, and part of the way the gifts, the way I feel and the way I see energy. And so, for example, when I'm working with clients, particularly clients I know well, I can often sense where they're functioning, how they're functioning, where they're getting their information from, and what kind of level they're working at, right? Because I'm so empathic to other people's energy. It's also certain things when I can tell people, some people have had certain medical things because I can feel things in my own energy fields. I can feel things about what's going on energetically. Now, that means that some of my skills are very physical. It's very about the physical energy aspect, right? So other than being able to be clairvoyant and being able to see things, I also have a strong knowing. There's this sort of now part of that is they said a lot of healers trying to kind of push me and psychics to go with them and study to do like trans mediumship and it just was not my thing. I'm like, no, 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 no. My soul wanted to use some of the aspects of the gifts that they could see in a different way that fitted my soul and fitted maybe even my beliefs. Maybe you never know what happens, but a lot of them said, "Oh my God, Eileen, you really could because of the level of what you pick up on your level of sensitivity." And most of them said, one of the reasons that you're very disabled by a lot of this is because you're the unruly empath. You've not been able to cultivate yet, and you've not been able to master your gifts. And that is part of the journey, right? So it's about going back to basics and thinking about what is something you are amazing at, right? And are you allowing it to flow? Are you allowing it to grow? Are you allowing it to evolve? Because often it evolves into something else. I started to suppress many of my gifts. Now, there's other gifts that I never suppress, so I'm very lucky that. But what happens the more that you allow one or two of your gifts to come through and you allow them to be more open and you don't have a restraint how that shows up. You don't have a preconception of how that shows up. Well, guess what? Things start to really, really evolve, right? And they show up in different ways and you can choose how you work. So obviously a lot of these psychics and mediums were just looking because they were right into that kind of work. By them, what they identified in me, they could see that that was a route I could choose to do. I chose not to go. It didn't feel right for me. But one of the things is that I recognized after those experiences, because it was happened to me time and time and time again, people saying it to me. I started to realize that there is so many gifts that we all have, but we don't do enough work in spiritual work now to allow those gifts to come through. Now, I spend a lot of time in learning. I do, and I understand many people have families and partners. I don't have that. So I have a luxury to be able to invest a lot of time and energy every year. I invest in at least one or two courses. It might be a full course. This year, what I've invested probably about 3 or 4 courses. One person I've invested over the last 3 years, who has been it's quite an intensive master healing thing. I've been doing that for 3 years. I also occasionally, there's a teacher I've worked for about 5 years on and off with, and I invest in some of her courses on and off. And then there's other courses I invest in, right? We're all different, but if we want to really, really evolve our soul, we have to get quiet. We have to stop listening to people try and pigeonhole you into what modern society is trying to make us palatable or what is trying to make us successful. Of course, you still have to, it has to be palatable in the way that people will buy something and understand it. But people are all trying to fit themselves into like the latest fad or something that a coach is telling them it sounds right because that's what's in at the moment, or they're using terms to describe themselves that's not accurate, but it sounds good, it sounds new agey, or it sounds more spiritual. And what they're doing is keeping themselves trapped. Of course, there's certain titles sometimes I use just for my marketing strategy and also as keywords for people to find me. My other business is called Stress Coach Training. Now, I actually am more a teacher. I'm not a coach, even though I'm a training coach and I studied lots of advanced coaching skills. Where is my skill? It's teaching. I've never changed that business name just because I've been known in the industry for a while, and it's just one area of my work, right? But the reality is I'm more a mentor, right? So we're all unique and we're all different. But I want you to really ask yourself, is my soul free? Does my soul feel free? Because I have to say, no matter what is going on with me health wise or my circumstances, and even the last 8 years when I was, mostly housebound, a lot of the times my soul felt so free because I was still living my purpose, right? I was coming from a state of flow on a daily basis, so I was happy, right? And I was happier than most people round about me, even though they had different circumstances and maybe able to have other types of physical freedoms. When the soul is free, when the soul is in a state of flow, it in many ways, the outside world, it's harder for it to interfere. Now, I'm not saying I definitely don't have it better today. I'm not saying that. But what I'm trying to do is help you to understand when you're tapping into the soul and your soul gifts and your soul essence, or when you're coming from the ego and you're looking at everything from an analytical or logical perspective, because we all do it, right? Now, I had an idea this morning. There is something. So I've got master classes coming out at the beginning of the year to do archetypes. Now I have spent, and Caroline knows, I've spent a good part of this year really working behind the scenes on this project, right? And it's took a lot longer than planned, right? But it's also based on many. I've studied archetypes for 25 years. I started studying with brand archetypes about, maybe would it be about 10 years ago? I started probably getting more into it about the last real in-depth into about last 6 or 7 years ago. But there was something else I felt that could be to do between this. I'm going to ask you and see if this is something that I'll put this video out to different channels I've got. But I want to ask you if you would be interested in a 7-day course that helps you go more soul deep, right? That helps you really get into more of the soul energy and understand the soul energy of you and the soul energy of your business. Because some people just think when it's your business that automatically it's all your soul energy. Of course, your business is an extension of you, but your business also has fragments of lots of other things. It has to, because it's sometimes about things that you've been taught from other people, It's got the energy of how you deliver it, where you deliver it, and all sorts of things. It's got the energy of what it represents. So when you understand the energy of you and you understand the energy of your business, it makes a huge difference when you go to market your business, when you understand what soul clients are going to be an exact match, what clients are not going to be an exact match, and why. It can help you understand so much more. So if this is something that you're interested, it will be a very low cost, but it's just about helping you explore. It'll be a simple thing over 7 days, not a lot of pressure. 7 tasks or something like that, something like 7 tasks or 7 bite-sized things to do over a 7 day to help you get more connected with the energy of your soul and your business. Okay. So enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you found this helpful. Bye bye, everyone.